Hello, I hope you're having a great day. My name is June Edwards, and I'm talking to you today about senior topics. And there's a few things that I wanted to talk about. The first one is how great it is that we can be Americans. And I hope you feel that way. I know I do. And we should be grateful for our blessings. COVID-19 is still around, but we're coming out of quarantine. We're learning how to deal with it. And this is the way that we want it to be. We want to be able to get on with our lives. And hopefully, one of these days, we're going to be able to be together again and see each other face to face. So, the first thing I wanted to do is have us sing. I like to start with singing just to make sure everybody's awake. And this is a song that was written by an American poet. He was riding the rails around the country. It was 1945. World War II had ended. The country was pulling together and getting ready to move on after a crisis. And he wrote this song while he was riding on the rails, and it's called "This Land is Your Land." If you know it, would you sing it along with me? This land is your land, this land is my land, from California to the New York Island, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. As I was walking that ribbon of highway, I saw above me the endless skyway. I saw below me that golden valley. This land was made for you and me. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island. From the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. And I hope that you enjoyed that. I hope you sang along if you could. And I have something that was written by a veteran from World War II. He's one of my former creative writing students at the NOCE program. Howard was 92 years old when he wrote this, and it's called The American Way. Let me get a glass of water here. Why am I glad to be American? The answer can be complex and extensive, but after considerable thought can be all included in one word: liberty. And he's got liberty in all capital letters. We are free to act, to travel, to learn and speak as we want or wish. But what price must we pay for that freedom? We each owe a duty and obligation to attempt to conduct ourselves in both thought and action without injury to others. Our forefathers and our subsequent leaders have defined limits of decorum by adopting many laws and rules governing our moral and ethical behavior, guided by our Constitution and its Bill of Rights. Most of us try to keep our social, professional, and daily living activities within those limits. But human nature being what it is, there are always divisions between the good guys and the bad guys. The bad guys are those who disregard the rights of others and do harm as if the rules don't apply to them. Most of us try to follow the rules because we have learned that reasonable regulation simplifies and improves our life experience. Until there was some regulation placed on their life activities, early settlers found little pleasure in American living, other than hard-won food on the table and protection from storms and predators. Now, today, we are surrounded with plentiful necessities, safety, and comfort. Surely this makes it nice to live in America as compared to many other parts of the world. But this is not the real reason I'm glad to be an American. Through the years, we have developed a fundamentally sound system of governing for a practical and productive free society, dependent upon laws and rules to encourage good guys and turn back or penalize bad guys. America has exemplified the concepts of liberty and freedom. This is truly the reason I am glad to be an American. And again, that's from Howard Childers, who was 92 years old when he wrote that. He fought in Burma during World War II. He was supervisor of the airplane mechanics, and they kept the planes running and providing supplies around different parts of Asia when our American GIs were over there. Well, thank you to Howard for that. Now I want to talk about the election is coming up, and I know this is political season where everybody seems to be angry and yelling at each other. And a little kid asked me the other day, why are all the adults so angry? And it is kind of something to think about, isn't it? But this is a poem that was written by my friend Mary Raymond. She's in her late 80s, and it's called Primary. Who to vote for, who to choose, who should win, and who should lose. I'm in a quandary, all because the candidates have many flaws. Each one claims the rest are wrong, and no one wants to get along. So, is the media to blame, exposing scandals, lies, and shame? Had we known more then, would there be a Roosevelt or Kennedy? Oh, how I wish someone would run as perfect as George Washington. And thank you to Mary for that very clever poem. Thank you. It was a great idea, too. Now we're going to move on, though, into a different topic. And I want to tell you about some of the different things that are coming up for this week in June. And we'll start with June 22nd. On June 22nd, the U.S. Department of Justice was established in 1870. Now, I kind of wonder, why did it take them almost 90 years to decide that they needed to establish a Department of Justice? But I don't know what they did to get along with without one, but they did get one going in 1870. On June 23rd, the typewriter was patented. You remember typing? That was in 1868, and I can remember having to teach the kids in high school how to put their fingers on the A and the D and the E, and how to figure out how to learn to type without looking at your hands. June 24th is known as UFO Day, first documented sightings. Now, it doesn't say what year this was, but it was in June 24th that there was the first documented UFO sighting. And UFO stands for unidentified flying object. Now, I heard that they first started seeing them in the 1940s, but who knows? And who knows if we'll have more sightings. On the 25th of June is Leon, L-E-O-N, Leon Day, and Leon is Noel, N-O-E-L, spelled backwards. And that means we have 6 months until Christmas is coming. And I know that on Hallmark, they like to play Christmas movies in July. I don't usually watch them because I like to celebrate July activities in July. But if you're one of these people that wishes it was Christmas all year long, Just remember that June 25th, we're halfway there to Christmas coming. On the 26th is when the toothbrush was invented. You know how long ago that was? 1498. 600 years ago. What did they do to brush their teeth before? And what was the first toothbrush like? I'm sure it did not have plastic bristles in it, and it did not have a hard plastic handle. Maybe a wooden handle, who knows? On the 27th, the melody for the happy birthday song, Happy Birthday to You, that melody was written in 1859. So that was like 140 some years ago. And on the 28th is Paul Bunyan Day. Remember the literary giant Paul Bunyan from the Minnesota woods with his big blue oxen babe. Okay, so that's what's going on. Also, the 4th week of June is National Camping Week. And also the first day of summer was on Saturday, and that was the day that is Solstice Day. It's the longest day of the year. It's supposed to be 12 hours of sunshine, 12 hours of dark. Now in Norway, where my husband's family came from, they have a solstice, a summer solstice celebration. And at midnight, it's still light, somewhat light, a little bit dark. It's kind of hard to describe what it looks like, but it is still light, and you can see everywhere. And they're out there burning a fire, great big fire, and the young kids are dancing around it. They don't need much of an excuse to dance around. Okay, we're going to move on from there. Another little sip. Something that comes with summer that I certainly love, and I think you might too, is hot dogs. Now, I'm going to share with you some hot dog history, and this comes from the National Hot Dog and Sausage Council. Did you know there was a council for hot dogs and sausages? Now, if I was a cartoonist, I'd draw a picture of sausages and hot dogs sitting around a little circular table, and they're doing some consulting of some kind. Anyway, I know that's silly. Sausage, this is true now, sausage is one of the oldest forms of processed food. You could not guess how old and how far back it goes. Well, I'll tell you, if this would be a great quiz questions. You'd be really happy that I'm not there to see how much you're listening and give you a quiz. But this is one you're just going to have to think for yourself. The sausage is mentioned as far back in Homer's Odyssey, which is a Greek fable that was written in the 9th century BC. So that is 800 years before Christ. And then you add our 2,000 years. We're talking almost 3,000 years ago. People were eating hot dogs, but they didn't call them that. No. Now, Frankfurt am Main in Germany is traditionally credited with originating the Frankfurter. But this claim is disputed by those who assert the popular sausage, known also as a dachshund or little dog sausage, was created in the late 1600s by Johann Georg Henner, a butcher living in Coburg, Germany. How many of you have been to Coburg? Yeah, pretty place. According to this report, Georg Henner later traveled to Frankfurt to promote his new product. And here's a picture. It's a rather old one, probably from the 40s, of a hot dog stand. I think this is in New York City. get a picture of little stand that the men had. They had them way before cars. Used horses to pull them. In 1987, 17 years ago, is that right? Yeah, about that. The city of Frankfurt celebrated the 500th birthday of the hot dog in that city. It's said that the Frankfurter was developed there in 87, 5 years before Christopher Columbus set sail for the New World. Now, the people of Vienna, which is pronounced Wien, W-I-E-N, in Austria, point to the term Wiener or Wiener to prove their claim as the birthplace of the hot dog. So you see, there's a lot of disputes. What else is new? As it turns out, it's likely that the North American hot dog comes from a widespread common European sausage brought to our country by butchers from several different nationalities. Also in doubt is who first served the Dachshund sausage in a roll. One report says a German immigrant sold them along with milk rolls and sauerkraut from a push cart in New York City's Bowery during the 1860s. In 1871, Charles Feltman, a German butcher, opened up the first Coney Island hot dog stand and sold 3,684 Dachshund sausages in a milk roll during his first year in business. That is a lot of hot dogs. The year 1893 was also an important date in hot dog history. In Chicago that year, the Columbian Exposition, it's kind of like a World's Fair, brought hordes of visitors who consumed large quantities of sausages sold by vendors. People liked this food because it was easy to eat, convenient, and inexpensive. Didn't need silverware, didn't need a plate, just hold it in your hands. Hot dog historian Bruce Craig, and yes, there is such thing as a historian of hot dogs. Bruce Craig got his PhD in studying hot dogs. Bruce Craig is a retired professor emeritus at Roosevelt University. He says Germans always ate the hot dog, or actually the Dachshund sausages, with some kind of bread. Since the sausage culture is German, it's likely it was the Germans who introduced the practice of eating the Dachshund sausages, which we know today is the hot dog, nestled in a bun. And it was standard fare at baseball parks. Also in 1893, sausages became recognized all over baseball parks. This tradition is believed to have been started by a St. Louis bar owner, Chris von der Ahe, a German immigrant who also owned the St. Louis Browns, a Major League Baseball team. Now, who invented the hot dog bun? Well, many of the hot dog historians disagree that today's hot dog on a bun was introduced during the St. Louis, Louisiana Purchase Exposition in 1904. A Bavarian concessionaire, Anton Feischwanger, says that he loaned gloves to his patrons to wear so they could hold the piping hot sausages. Can you imagine having to lend out gloves to everybody? Well, because most of the gloves were not being returned, the supply began running low. He reportedly asked his brother-in-law, a baker, for help. The baker improvised long, soft rolls that fit the meat. and invented the hot dog bun. And sadly, nobody knows his name. Well, everybody wants to claim the hot dog bun as their own invention. Most likely it was probably brought over by German immigrants, and then it became quickly widespread in American culture. Well, where did we get the term hot dog? There's another story that riles the serious hot dog historians, but I just don't see how can you be so serious if you had to say your job title was hot dog historian. I'm sorry, folks. I do think it's kind of funny, and I hope you do too. Oh boy. Some say the word hot dog was coined in 1901 at the New York Polo Grounds on a very cold April day. Vendors were hawking hot dogs from portable hot water tanks and shouting, "They're red hot! Get your Dachshund sausages, they're red hot!" A New York Journal sports cartoonist, Tad Dorgan, observed the scene and quickly drew a cartoon of barking Dachshund sausages nestled warmly in rolls. He wasn't really sure how to spell the German word Dachshund, so he simply wrote hot dog. The cartoon is said to have been a sensation, and that's how the term hot dog was started. However, there's just a little glitch to that story. Historians have been unable to find the original cartoon, despite Dorgan's enormous body of work and his popularity. Well, we've got hot dogs to this day. Speaking of hot dogs, another big summer tradition is baseball. But you know, sad to say, the baseball stands are still not open. There's been a lot of disagreement. You know, the teams play a long season, 140 or so games. And this year they were trying to create a deal where they would play 70 games. Here it is, almost the end of June, and they're fighting over how much money. Should they get their full salary? Should they get 50% of their salary since they're playing 50% of the games? And nobody seems to be able to agree to a deal. So at this point in time, we do not have baseball games yet. But I do have a nice picture, a painting by Norman Rockwell. It shows what happens when you get June gloom, which is what we have in Southern California here. The day starts out gray and cloudy, and then as afternoon comes, the games are able to go on. And I like this. Look at behind the umpires. See the two guys? Are they cutting a deal back there? These two guys. This one looks serious. The other one's grinning. And I don't know what the heck they're talking about. There's a reason why Norman Rockwell put them in there. Well, I want to tell you that Babe Ruth is probably one of the most famous people in all of baseball history. He was born George Herman Ruth, February 6, 1895 in Baltimore, Maryland. He died in August of 1948 in New York City. 6'2" in height, 215 pounds. He was a left-hander batter, and he was also a left-handed pitcher. He entered the major leagues in July of 1914. His last Major League Baseball appearance, May 30, 1935. He was elected to the Hall of Fame in 1936, and some of his career highlights include two-time All-Star selection in 1933 and 1934. He was a seven-time World Series champion, 1915, 1916, 1918, 1923, 1927, and 28 in 1932. And he was the MVP Most Valuable Player in 1923. His jersey number 3 was retired by the New York Yankees in 1948. He was a member of the Major League Baseball's All-Century team, voted Athlete of the Century by the Associated Press, ESPN Sports Century #2 Athlete of the 20th Century, was named the greatest baseball player of all time by the Sporting News, and named the greatest baseball player of the 20th century by Sports Illustrated. Interesting thing about Babe Ruth, he struck out almost as many times as he made home runs, but man, the power behind his hit was amazing. I wanted you to know that he did come to Southern California with a good friend. And what did he do? He actually put on an exhibition game after the World Series had ended. And that was back in the day of what year was that? See if I can find it. I'm looking for it here in my notes. Sorry, I just got to strum through things here real quick. 1924. What happened was there was a natural incline, like a little amphitheater. It was an infield piece. They called it the Brea Bowl, and it was a natural amphitheater owned by Union Oil in 1924. And the exhibition game was organized by the Anaheim Elks Club, part of a postseason barnstorming tour. And there are pictures from the game, and I'll show you one in just a minute, on exhibition at the Brea Museum and Heritage Center. Now, there's not too much of old Brea left because most of it has become modernized, but the Babe Ruth / Walter Johnson, he was a big man in his day, story was because Walter Johnson was one of the greatest pitchers in baseball history. He amassed 417 wins and 110 shutouts in a career that spanned 21 years. And he was the whole time with the Washington Senators, who were also known as the Nationals. Johnson was the hardest thrower of his era. He was nicknamed the Big Train by sports writer Grantland Rice, and he had a strikeout record of 3,509 struck out, which stood for more than 50 years until Nolan Ryan from our day broke that record. Walter's father, Frank, brought his family west around 1900 in search of oil and found it in Olinda, a little boom town east of Brea. It's covered by the waters from the dam out that way now. It was here that Johnson frolicked as a teenager, rode a black mare, worked the rough and tumble oil fields, began playing baseball for the Union Oil Wells, and forged his future. Johnson attended Fullerton Union High School. In 1905, he had struck out 27 batters in a 15-inning game against Santa Ana High. But 2 years later, he was pitching for the big league paychecks. He was 36 and nearing the end of a great career when he triumphantly returned to Brea in 1924, only days after winning Game 7 of the World Series against the New York Giants. It was the only championship ever won by the mostly sad sack Senators. And it was a crowning about time moment for the beloved Johnson. Here he was coming back to his hometown. His Orange County friends crowded around newspaper officers to get updates after the 1924 World Series. And what did they crowd around in this area? Very primitive radio crystal sets. Well, Johnson returned to Brea for a little business, and he brought with him a pretty good ringer, Babe Ruth. You know, the Yankees had failed to win the pennant in 1924, but it wasn't the Babe's fault. He won his only batting crown that year. hitting .378 and led the league with 46 home runs and drove in 121 runs. The Anaheim Elks coerced Ruth into riding with Johnson in a pregame Halloween parade. And then they came in. I'm going to show you a picture. This is somebody holding the picture at the current site. Of course, now it's just a group of homes. I'm going to show you this. You can see the mountains in the background are the same. And the man that took this photograph, the current photograph, is holding a very, very rare photo of the game. Look at all the oil derricks back there. And Babe Ruth is in that picture, and he also autographed the photo. And nothing there now. It's all been submitted over. But at least it gave Brea a claim to fame. Well, that's it for today, folks. I hope you have a wonderful afternoon. Just remember, summer is the season for hot dogs and singing and baseball. See you next week. Bye-bye.